Bruchim haboim, welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Memvov Amid Beis, 3 lines from the top. The Gemara brought, according to one opinion, the bracha, the 4th bracha, Birkas HaMazon, HaToiva HaMeitiv, is the Araisa. However, the Gemara subsequently brought 2 proofs that it's Dirabanan. The first proof was that, in fact, Payalim delete this bracha. If it was deraisa, how can they delete the bracha? It must be derabanan. The second proof the Gemara brought was that it's not smucha lechaverta. If it was indeed a bracha that's deraisa, just like the second and third bracha of the Birkas HaMazon, which uses the first baruch in Baruch Hazones HaKol as its bracha to be poiseach, the second and third bracha was called a bracha that's smucha lechaverta, which does not require them to then begin with baruch. Then why does the 4th bracha of Hatov HaMeitiv have to begin with baruch? It must be that it's not smucha lechaverta, it's a bracha v'fnei atzmoi, because it's a bracha that's midirabanan. The Gemara now brings a third raya proof that Hatov HaMeitiv is only midirabanan. Says the Gemara, v'omer of Nachman Bar Yitzchok Teida. I'll prove to you that Hatov HaMeitiv lav d'oraisa. Shaharei oikrin oisa b'beis ha'ovel. Because they delete this bracha in the beis ha'ovel. Kedetani, like it says in the Brisa. Mahem oimrim b'beis ha'ovel. Baruch Hatov HaMeitiv. According to the Tanakama, the bracha is Hatov HaMeitiv. Rabbi Akiva oimer Baruch Dayan ha'emes. Rabbi Akiva says the bracha is Dayan ha'emes, not Baruch Hatov HaMeitiv. And therefore, this is the proof that it's deleted in the Beis HaOvel. The Gemara asks, according to the Tanakama, Hatov HaMeitiv in Dayan Emes Loi. You don't make the bracha Dayan ha'emes, which is so appropriate in the Beis HaOvel. Ela Eima Af Hatov HaMeitiv. You must say that indeed he makes the bracha Dayan Emes, but in addition, Dayan ha'emes, he also makes the bracha Hatov HaMeitiv. Mar Zutra ikloi lebei Rav Ashi, Isra bei Milsa. Mar Zutra visited the house of Rav Ashi, and unfortunately, there was an unfortunate event that occurred in the house of Rav Ashi, meaning to say, Rav Ashi lost one of his close relatives. Pasach u'barich Mar Zutra opened up by making the following bracha. HaToiva Meitiv, referring to Hashem as the Toiva Meitiv. Kel Emes, the Kel of truth. Dayan Emes, the judge of truth. Shoifei B'tzedek, he judges righteously. Loikeach B'mishpat, he takes with justice. V'sholit Ba'olamoi La'asois B'hiritzonoi, and he controls his world and does according to his will. Ki kol derachav mishpat, all of his ways are just. Sha'akol shelo v'anachnu amo va'avodov, everything belongs to him, and we are his, and we are his servants. Ubechol, and everything anachnu chayovim lahoidois loi ulevarcho, we are obligated to thank him and to then bless him. Goy der protzois b'Yisrael, Hashem is the one who fixes up the breaches in Klal Yisrael. Hu yigdor es hapirtza hazos b'Yisrael l'chayim. He will also make the fence of those breaches in Yisrael for life. Leheichen hu chayzer. Now the Gemara asks, where does he go back? When the mezamein hears the response of those who are participating in the zimun, so then he repeats, what does he go back to? Does he go back to nivarech, what he said before, or does he say Baruch Shochan Mishaloi and continue on? Says the Gemara, it's a machloikis. Rav Zvi Mishmei da Abai Amar Choyzer L'Roish, that he goes back to the beginning and says Nevorech Shochan Mishaloi. Rabban Amar LeMakom Sheposak. Rabban say he continues on from where he left off, and he says Baruch Shochan Mishaloi V'Tvo Chayinu. V'Hilchas LeMakom Sheposak. And the halach is that he continues on from the place where he left off and says, Baruch Shochalnu Mishaloi Uvtuvoi Chayinu. The Gemara tells us more about Seudos. Amar l'Reish Galusa l'Rav Sheshes. The Reish Galusa said to Rav Sheshes, Af agav the Rabbanan kashishe aton, even though you elderly sages are you're elderly. You have elderly sages, you're wise men that are elderly. Parsoi b'tzarchei seuda b'ki minaychu. The Persians, they know the aspects of Suda greater than you. Bizman shehen shtei mitois gadol meisei barosh v'sheni lo lamala himenu. When the two people eat together, the greater of them, he first lies down and reclines. That's the way they used to eat. And the sheni, the one who was not as great as him in stature, would then recline above him where his head is. Ubizman shehem sholosh gadol meisei be'emtza sheni lo lamala himenu shlisha lamata himenu. If there are three that are going to eat, then the greatest one, he reclines and he's in the middle. The second one is above the head of the first. And the third one, he reclines beneath the legs of the middle one, the greatest one. Omar lei, Rav Shesha says to him, V'chi boy ishtavei bahadei mitaretz terutzi v'yosif umishtai bahadei. He says, if the greatest one will want to talk to the second one, so then he'll be forced to straighten up and sit down, and then have to then speak to the person he wants to speak with, which would be very inconvenient. Omarle shiny parsoi de machavele b'machoig. He says the parsoim are different because they signal, and with their hands they make gestures, and therefore that's how he can communicate with the one that is the second one. Now he continues to ask, Mayim Rishonim mehechen matchilin? Where do they begin Mayim Rishonim? Before they eat the bread and they wash Netilas Yadayim. Who's the first one to wash? Omarle min hagadol, the greatest one in stature, he washes first. Yeshev gadol v'yishmor yadav asher noitlen kulon. You're going to then force the first one, who's the greatest one, to wash his hands and wait for everybody else. He said, no, immediately they bring the table before him. They used to have individual tables, so then immediately after the Gadol would wash, they would bring his table in front of him, therefore he can then make Birkas HaMoitzi and continue to eat. The Mayim Achronim, before benching, who does that begin with? From the lowest one in stature. That means that the greatest one would have to wait until it gets to him to then relieve him of his dirty hands. They wouldn't remove the table from in front of him. They would allow him to continue to eat until it's time for him to wash. Then they would remove the table and give him his water to wash Mayim Achronim. Amar Rav Sheshes rather, Ana masnisa yadana. He speaks to the Reish Galusa, I have a Braisa. That's what I know. The Tanya, for the Braisa, teaches the following. Ketzad Seder Hasei. What is the order of reclining and making a Seuda? Says the Braisa, Bizman shehein shtei mitois. At a time when there are two mitois, two people then are eating together, then Gadol Meisei Barosh v'sheni lo lamata himenu. The Gadol, he is Meisei Barosh, he first reclines, and the second one, he will go underneath. That means that he'll recline by the feet of that first one, whereby if the first one wants to speak to the second one, he can do so very easily. Bizman shein sholosh mitois, Gadol Meisei Barosh, sheni lo lamala himenu, shlishi lo lamata himenu. When there are three, then indeed the greatest one is in the middle. The second one will recline above the head of the first one, and the third one will then recline by the feet of the first one. Because always the greatest one is in the middle, and therefore he has no choice but to put the second one above him, and the less one, the third one, beneath him. Says the Gemara, Mayim Rishonim, Matchilim min Gadol. The Mayim Rishonim is given to the Gadol first. Again, they would then allow him to wash and then bring his table before him. Mayim achronim bizman sheim chamisha matchilim min hagadol. By mayim achronim, when there are 5 or less, then they would begin with the one who's the greatest one in stature, who would then wash first, and then he would make the zimun and birkas hamazon. Ubizman shehem meyo, meaning if there's more than 5, even 100, matchilim min hakoton, they would start with the least of stature, because that's how anyways they would sit. Then he would wash first. Ashemegin eitzel hey, until they would get to the last 5. Then then they would go to the greatest one, and he would wash first of the last 5. And the place where the mayim achronim return to, that means again the first of the last 5. That's who would make the bracha. That means the one who is the greatest of stature, he would then wash first of the last 5. Says the Gemara, this is a support. In this Gemara we saw previously, I believe on Daf Mem Gimel, Amud Aleph, the Gemara said as follows: Messiah lay Rabbi Chia bar Ashi Amarav. This is a support for Rabbi Chia bar Ashi, who said in the name of Rav. Kol anoitel yada ba'achroina techila hu mezuman lebracha. The first one to wash at the end, he's the one who's going to then be given the zimun and the benching to make. Which means that he's the greatest in stature, he's the one who's going to make the leader of the zimun, of the benching. Omar le Reb Chia, so Gemara tells, Rav Chia havu yasi b'sudos kamei de Rebbe. Rav and Rabbi Chia were present, eating together with Rebbe. Omar le Rebbe le Rav. Rebbe turned to Rav, his Talmud, and he said, Kum mashi yadeich, get up and wash your hands. Chazia de kamartes. Rabbi Chia saw that his friend Rav was agitated and uncomfortable, that Rebbe maybe asked him to get up and wash because he did something else inappropriate. Omar le bar pachti, the son of noblemen, of great people. Ayin birkas mezoina ka Omar loch. He said that you should look at the birkas hamazon. By giving you the first to wash, he'll give you an extra few seconds before I and he will wash, whereby you'll be able to then look into the birkas hamazon and prepare yourself to be the mezamin.